was a mighty nation, blessed above all of creation.
Charlie Daniels, he's always loved America.
Let me just read a little thing here. The American system of justice must be changed to conform to the rest of the world. Individual rights will have to take a back seat to the collective. Well, you know what the next move's going to be, don't you? It's going to be coming after your gun.
Oh, yeah.
I tell you, it ain't going to sit well down my way at all. It ain't going to sit well.
Do you ever wonder what happened to America? They lost. We won. Want to see what Trump's up against?
It's time to ride, boys. We need 1,000 Paul Reveres.
When I was a boy, it was okay to be proud of the flag, heritage, mom, and apple pie. And beef was for supper. Revelation, Dawn of Global Government. Theatrical screenings on demand. DVDs now available. Starring Alex Jones, Charlie Daniels, Special Ops General Jerry Boykin. Want to shed some tears over the red, white, and blue? Revelation, the movie.info. Let's fix it.
Our guests today are Anita and Chuck Untersee, sharing their latest revolutionary film, Revelation, Dawn of a Global Government. The American Republic, Christian faith, and liberty are rapidly being destroyed by a Trojan horse of globalism. Few realize how truly wrong it has gone. Issues of control are far greater and darker than which party dominates the political spectrum. Global government, driven by an unelected and ruthless elite, is the enemy of mankind. This movie goes deeper into all these issues with influential interviews and speakers from around the United States. To find out more and to get your very own copy of this film today, go to revelationthemovie.info. Hi, Anita. Hi, Chuck. Welcome to Savvy Business Radio and our Heartbeat of the World series. I'm so grateful to have you both join us. I was greatly blessed to be able to buy a copy of your wonderful film that recently hit the shelves, Revelation, Dawn of a Global Government. It was such a unique film where you really went behind the scenes and talked to some of the most influential people fighting for our republic today, to getting a real pulse on what's really going on in our republic and what we can do to make things better for our country and the world. Share with us a little bit about why you came to creating that film, and you're now working on a trilogy. Share a little bit about that with our audience.
Okay, we began, well, to back up, we spent 20 years in LA working in the film business and are from Texas, but moved back here in '04 and began this project about the time Obama was elected the first time. Started off a little slowly, and we thought, well, typical film like this should take a year, maybe a little more, and it would have 6 or 7 people that we interview and tell the story. And because we'd always been fascinated with the concept of evolving global government and loss of American sovereignty. And so we began the project, and as it unfolded, we got more and more access to people who were just amazing, vital people who were experts in particular areas of what's happening internationally. And so as we got more access, the film got bigger, and as it got bigger, we had to raise more money, and so it went sort of leapfrogging through an evolution towards completion. And at this point, it's taken 5 years, and we began about 3 years ago to have the idea of having a trilogy because we were getting so much more information. And at that point, 2016, Obama's America came out, and we were offered a theatrical release. And we, of course, you have to, as an independent, you have to raise your own advertising money, P&A funds. So we jumped into that, and we were thrilled because it's really difficult to get a documentary in theaters. And we opened it in Houston, and it was 7th in the nation for opening weekend box office. So it did really well, and that was purely a test to see if we could get attention from investors and raise the money before the election. So we did. We actually got about half of the money raised, which was millions of dollars, several $1 million, but we were not able to complete that before the election. So we kind of have now jumped into the idea of taking the rest of the footage we shot and making it into a trilogy, because we had a total of something like 43 hours of footage. And of course, for a feature film, you only need an hour and a half. So, but that's kind of where we are now.
Wow. I must tell you both that when I watched the film, I was like, I loved all of the interviewees and speakers, and I just wanted them to speak a lot more. And I was like, I wanted the German lady to go in depth of her experiences and what she went through during the Holocaust and stuff. And for each of them to expand on it. I was so excited that Anita told me that you were going to do expanded versions in your upcoming film so we can really hear more of their interviews.
Yeah, it was really difficult to make each of the interviews too much longer than they were because you're limited to the theatrical requirement of, an hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes. And we had so much information to get out that we thought, we've got to stop somewhere. So but as I said, we now have 3 more hour and a half films we cut out of the footage that we just couldn't use.
Wow. Yeah, and what I was really impressed with, there was a wonderful guy named Mark Collins who plays the part of George Washington. He does a fabulous job at it. Just watching him, you feel like George Washington has come back to life and spoken to you about what the forefathers really wanted to create and what their true purpose was in creating the Republic and what they were trying to accomplish. And I think we've kind of, like you said in the beginning, kind of gone away from that true vision. And I think a lot of Americans, if you were to ask them, are unsettled. They're not happy where things are, but they kind of feel like, well, why bother changing because there's nothing I can really do. What's your take?
Well, the other thing there, the other point there that is kind of a double-edged sword is incrementalism, because these issues that we're dealing with today have evolved incrementally by design over such a long period of time that people have sort of gotten used to it, and because they've gotten used to it, they question their own thinking as to whether or not how terrible it really is. And so we've kind of lost that sense of free spirit that we once were, and it's incrementalism is a terrible way to get you used to a downfall.
Yeah,
I mean, it's a good way for those people doing it, not for the people receiving it. But and as far as George Washington, Mark is a funny guy. He was in the History Channel 10-part series titled "The Revolution" as Washington, and they picked him because he had already been he's a Baptist pastor. He'd already been doing this ministry for all over the country. He spoke at the National Day of Prayer, Republican Convention, all these major places. And they picked him because he looks precisely like a plaster life mask that was done in the 18th century for a painting of Washington. And they made a split face. They really wanted the perfect Washington. They made a split face of the original casting, and you really can hardly tell the difference when you look back and forth. Wow. And he was prematurely gray at the same time. He's the same physical size. He has a white ponytail. I mean, he's just totally aware and an expert in the area of the founding, especially the faith of the founding fathers. So is always contorted as to being that they were deists and so on. But like so many things, it's been a distortion. But
yeah, well, it's truly amazing. And what's cool is that he really has a pulse that can really start to bring people into the real history of our country, which often is lost. When I was in school, we did have to study the Constitution, which is more than I can say for most people going to school today, where you're pretty much not taught anything great about our republic. Everything's taught to see it as evil and bad. And when you look at our history, it wasn't about that. And I find it kind of sad that kids are getting a false or a revisionist view of our republic and how we came to be. And so for people who kind of have an understanding, you had mentioned that we've gotten to a point where we were kind of poisoned bit by bit with this new thinking or this revisionist thinking. How can people kind of get learn what's really going on? Because I think they're unsettled knowing things aren't perfect, but how do they get back that taste of freedom where they crave liberty once again?
Well,
to me, I think that the Constitution is really the basis for everything that we're talking about. And if people will look at the basis of our country and why our country is different and free, it's not a democracy either. And most people consider it to be a democracy. And we're said to be spreading democracy, and that's really not true, because a democracy is, what is it, two sheep and a wolf,
Yes.
two wolves and a sheep.
It's mob rules, really.
Fighting.
Yeah.
Right. So, anyway, I think that if people will go back and look at the principles that our country was founded on, they'll find that it was completely unique in history, and it is something that we really need to understand so we can one by one take back our freedoms and recognize the many, many, many things that are done on every level from local to federal that are not constitutional, that we should not be putting up with. So I think if we start that way, it will help us to recognize what's really going on.
I think too that another way to answer your question is pain. If people really get to the point where there's total economic collapse, or Agenda 21 is fully recognized for what it is, a loss of American sovereignty with a world organization telling American citizens how they're going to live, or being able to be extradited for various infringements. Once the pain of those things that people take for granted has fully impacted the average person, then they're going to probably wake up and start investigating some of these things. And that's what we hope this film will do, is sort of be a Paul Revere to people that don't quite get it. And because it's still astoundingly, you can talk to people on the street about, do you know what Agenda 21 is? And 95% of them have absolutely no clue. But Agenda 21 is the UN plan for the 21st century, which calls for no sovereign nations, the UN controls all food and water, a reduction of global population by 90%, and it just goes on and on. Forced vaccines, state-controlled education. I mean, it's a complete totalitarian environment.
And what's interesting about the UN, and if you do a bit of history, I mean, really look into the back of it, it was built on a slaughterhouse. It is, the way I see it, and the policies it's put on, what it's done around the world, has not been a organization of peace. I know it puts itself out there as such. And when I hear people talk about, the committee to blah, 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 peace, I'm like, okay, those are words. Look at the actions. The actions they've put into the world are horrible, and they're nothing. They're not about individuality. They're not about promoting peace. I mean, look at it, about controlling water and population of the world and food. There was actually a big company with the CEO said, because they're buying out a lot of fresh water, they said, well, water is a privilege, not a right. It's something he put out there. And I'm like, no, God created water, and no man can decide I'm just going to take up water and say what men and what women can have it. And it's really scary stuff. But I think you're right, Chuck. I think when people begin to get uncomfortable, but I'd rather not see it get to the point where we have Agenda 21 enacted for people to be like, whoa, what's going on here? Amendments. Right. I mean, you hear people say constitutional amendment rights all the time, but they've never even picked up a constitution. And I'm like, have you actually read the Constitution?
Well, the other head of the Hydra is the Islamic threat.
Yes.
And General Boykin, who is one of the lead people in the film, was a three-star general Army. He was head of all special operations. He was one of the founding members of Delta Force. He was the commander in Mogadishu, and then eventually became the movie Black Hawk Down. Major guy. So he actually was up for his fourth star and got basically disengaged, pushed, because he was speaking out against the Islamic threat, and that was early on, like the 9/11 window. And now it's so self-evident to anyone that really has no scales on their eyes that there's a Trojan horse agenda, which is controlled by the global elite, Soros being among those, it's a Trojan horse, somewhat silent invasion of Europe, and they've got the same thing planned here. Yeah. And, when people say Islam is the religion of peace, that it couldn't be more ludicrous, because Islam is a totalitarian governmental system, and its only maybe 10% so-called faith, and the rest of it, Sharia law, is being pushed all over this country to be implemented, which has the barbaric 8th century concept of FGM, women, genital mutilation, honor killing, spreading, as with Christianity, where you're supposed to spread the gospel to all the world. In Islam, you're supposed to spread Islam to all the world, but through jihad. And there are several levels of jihad, one of which is cut people's heads off, the other which is invade environments and overpopulate. Like the population in Europe, the indigenous population is being reduced naturally because no one is they don't have kids anymore.
Yeah.
And the Muslims have 7, 8, 9, 10, and the point is they can get political control after a certain time, and we've seen, without even having the greater population at this point in Europe, what they're doing. So you can imagine what it'd be like when they really got, they outnumber the indigenous population, and they would do that here in a second, and they are trying to do that.
They are.
We're more aware, and we're seeing it. And of course, we have a Second Amendment. I don't think you would have had the incidents here go off easily as they do in Europe, because the Europeans have been so coward in their environment and their self-deprecating world of we don't want to offend anybody. Well, you know what? They better start offending people, or there won't be anybody for them to. They won't be able to be offended, because there won't be any of them left.
Yeah.
And
well,
I mean, how?
Yeah, I was just going to say that the two arguments I've heard from the left side thinking here in New York and in other areas is, well, our amendments protect everyone, and so equal rights, and people should have the right to speak and freedom of religion. I'm like, for one, if you're here legally, no, those particular constitutional rights do not protect outsiders. They're here to protect us, the citizens, for one. Number two, Sharia law is in no way, no how compatible with Western thinking here or in Europe. There's no way within its system, and I call it an ideology, not even a religion. It is a political ideology that is really based on conquest and submission. You submit and you become a part of our tribe, or you die. Now here's the other argument I've heard from the left, is they say, well, how is that any different than what we did to the Indians? We came here, we forced them, a lot of times, quote unquote, what we've been told in school, to force them to be Christian. So were we any better? And then I say to them, so does that mean we're supposed to turn around and let what happened to the Indians happen to us? What do you say? Are you saying that it's okay for us to be the victim now? What do you say? So, I mean, those are the two arguments I've heard. But
Well, the funny thing is, I think you hit it on the head. If we wanted to solve our immigration problem, all we have to do is enforce the law.
Yeah.
And the vast majority of these people are here illegally. And my father came from Europe, and in the early 30s, and when they came, they went through Ellis Island. They did the whole thing. Everybody waved off the ship at the Statue of Liberty. And when they got here, my grandfather said, "You will not speak German again. You will become an American. You will integrate." And now there are enclaves all over America where they're self-imposing Sharia law, and Sharia law is completely illegal under the Constitution, because the Constitution is the supreme law of the land, and there is no room for anything else. There's no reason for it to need to be compatible. And so when people don't want to come here to become American, they just want to, essentially it's a jihad concept, come here, overwhelm, enforce our way, and don't assimilate. So there's no room for that. And when it gets down to it, there's going to be a cataclysmic pushback. Yeah. And so it would be better to head that off the pass than wait like the Europeans, where they're virtually gone. Yeah. And,
It's completely, yeah, I totally see your point. And interestingly, a lot of the SJWs, as they call themselves, or feminists will say, oh, well, they'll put on hijabs and say the women's right to do that is a religion of peace. And I implore them, look at the history, actually read the hadith, actually read the Quran. I've actually made contact with people who are who are now converted Christians, who had been Muslims, and who devout Muslim, not just Muslims like, oh yeah, I'm Muslim on Saturday or whatever, and I go to do a couple prayers and that's it. No, I mean devout Muslims. I live, breathe, eat it. It is my complete ideology. They now say they've sat down with me and explained all the different parts of the Quran and what they're really trying to accomplish, and it is no way peaceful. And so I really implore people just to look at it yourself. Don't take what we're saying or anyone's saying or a movie. Just research it yourself. Prove us wrong. As one Muslim said, he said, you know what? I got into becoming a Christian because I had a Christian friend that happened to me, and I was trying to convert him to Islam. And so I was reading the Quran and trying to get him into it. And he said, okay, then let's argue this out. I'm gonna argue the Bible with you. So they actually had this a 2-year back and forth argument, or kind of back and forth, and you know what, he was converted to Christianity. He said, I got to the point where I just couldn't uphold it anymore. It didn't make sense. But he had a deep desire of seeking. He wanted to really understand who is really God. I want to really, really, really follow God. And the more he went into the Bible, he found that it wasn't compatible with really understanding God.
Yeah,
there's a really fascinating book out called Seeking Allah, Finding Jesus.
That's him.
This is the same. Oh, you've great book.
Yes.
Got it on Audible and listened to it a couple times because just the Muslim didn't really know all the parts of the Quran, just like most Christians don't know every detail of the Bible. But when I forget what they call them, but the heads of the...
Anita, why don't you explain to her about Kamal? It is in the film.
Ooh.
Okay. Well, yeah, Kamal Salim is in our film, and it was a former terrorist, Muslim terrorist. He was raised as a child to learn all these things and came up. He's a Sunni, I believe, right, Chuck?
Yeah. He was a major guy in the Muslim Brotherhood.
They sent him over here in his 20s to be a sleeper cell, and that's what he set out to do. But he had an encounter with several Christians when he was in a severe car accident, and they were doing as Christians are supposed to do. They helped them, doctors, different people who offered him assistance along the way, place to stay and everything, and he saw through their acts, which is really what I would hope to do as a Christian through my life, to show what we are emulating as Christians. And so he couldn't continue on with his plan. So now his ministry is as a Christian, and it is to inform people of what's going on. He gives a really great breakdown of the difference in the two deities, of the Christian God and the God of Muslim. They're not the same. Allah is not the same at all. Allah expects you to sacrifice yourself and others as blood sacrifice for him, where the God of Christians gave his son for us. So he sacrificed himself for us. It's a totally flip side of two different gods. So a lot of Christian leaders are even trying to be, quote, inclusive and have Muslim services, at 9 o'clock, and then Christian services at 11, or maybe even merging them. Yeah. It really is another thing that really can't be done. And the thing about the Muslims is their belief is if they have come in and said their prayers there, like they did in Congress, then they have claimed that place of worship, or the building that they were in when they did their prayers before Congress. Now it becomes theirs.
Oh,
it's a conquest. for them.
Wow.
So,
Can I stop you really quickly? This is really fascinating to me, Anita, because just before Obama left, in the last 6 months, there was a huge influx of immigrants from the Muslim world into the United States. And I know because I live in New York City, and within my building, we have a 56-unit building, which is not a huge amount of units. But within the 56 units, we got 6 Middle Eastern new families move in within just 6 months. That is huge, considering the population is, I think, 0.1 or something in the entire country. To have that influx of that many people from Middle Eastern countries, and these were people who were all in hijab, I mean, really deeply, don't speak any English at all, no English. And what I found totally fascinating to me is that they started to pray in the hallways, like chant. And like, because we have these kind of echoing hallways, it reminded me of being in a mosque. And I said, I think it was like 2 weeks out, and I heard these chanting every evening. I was like, what the heck? This is not a church. And this is what I want. And that's why I tell everyone, I said, listen, this is, if you come here the right way, you come here legally, I want you to be able to practice your religion, have freedom of speech, be able to live the life you want, fine. But you don't enforce or push your way of thinking or being on me. So I went out there and I said to him, excuse me, do you have to be singing in the hallway? And he's like, I'm and I was like, no, could you please take that in your apartment? Because, you don't see me in the hallway saying, you don't see me in the hallway going, praise Jesus, and start singing hymns and stuff, because we each have a space to be, and we do have freedom. But it's to be respectful, and that's what I'm finding that, at least in my neighborhood here, we've had a lot of influx, and they're not respectful. They're kind of disrespectful. They're not happy to be here. They're not merging. They're not becoming Americans. They don't want to be Americans. They want us to or actually submit to their way, and that's where there's a problem.
Yeah.
Well, we live in a very different environment. We live we've got 60 acres, and we live off the grid, totally off the grid, with a windmill and with stoves for heat. We we can't see any neighbors, no wires, no lights, nothing. And I don't know if you would call us preppers, but we don't believe in waiting for someone else to figure it out for us. So we try to be ready. And I think that, and of course, Texas is a real ardent pro-gun environment, and I think that it's very scary, like in Europe, for instance, where people are just victims because they have no way to defend themselves, and the horrific gang rapes that happen, daily now, or of course. Bombings and other things that happen, which are just we've grown used to these horrific things taking place all the time, and that's an example of incrementalism. How can you get used to that? But people are, and it should not be considered normal. So I think the big thing the one thing that helps us, of course, Trump is a reprieve. I don't know. Yes. Where else it would go after that, because everybody in the world is after him. But he has already done things that are just astoundingly better than where we were when he took office, and like TPP and everything that he's doing, and it's just an amazing reprieve. But I think between that and the fact that we have the Second Amendment, it's not going to be half as easy. To do what's happening in Europe and what's going to happen worse in Europe.
Absolutely.
I think that quickly, because people just want, well, at least where we are in the land of the good old boys, you're just not going to get away with that.
Yeah. And, try that here.
That's actually not really true, because in Austin, which is all totally liberal, it's like the West Coast, but whatever, they're there and they are protesting. They're in Congress testifying, and they're trying to get all these things implemented here, just like everywhere else. Luckily, so far, our governor has held the line, Governor Abbott. But some of our friends from here have gone down there to testify, and they're bringing Muslims in busloads to testify why they want their their religion, by calling it a religion, they can ask for a lot more things than if they said, we want to bring our governmental system in. That wouldn't be, it's just twisting words around, like our government does and like the international people do to try to make a point. But it's everywhere. And of course, the population problem, I'm sure you've noticed the families that came in don't have 1.5 children. They have 5 or 6 or more, and they're taking over by the population.
And they don't have the skills, and they don't have the skills or workforce because they are coming here without knowing the language or the culture at all. So how are you able to fend for yourself? And that's one thing my partner says, like, how are they coming here and feeding themselves if they have no skills? They don't have the language. How are you able to get a job?
We're paying them. We're giving them the money, of course. You and I are paying for that.
Oh, lovely.
Here's an example of how the concept of a population jihad works. Soros funded the education of a doctor in Michigan. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, Dr. Abul El Said. He is born in America, has 0 accent, and is a diehard, devoted Muslim. And he has Eastern education. I think it was Harvard or Yale, one of the Eastern schools, and paid for by Soros. And he is running, he's a doctor, and he's running now, he will be running for governor of Michigan. He'll be the first Islamic governor, but he's also projected to be poised for running for president. And that's how you get control of a nation. You bring in these enclaves, they grow the population, and then they start demanding. And Kamal Salim, who's in our film, explained that. I forget the Islamic word for it, Arabic word for it, but there is it's a known concept. And they get up to a percent of maybe 6 or 7, 10% in an area, and then they start demanding. At first, they just are there, and then they start demanding. And all they have to do is get politically embedded, and you've got a big problem. And I have, I don't care one way or another about Muslims in terms of what they want and how they want to live. But I've lived in the Middle East. I'm a retired Army officer, and I can tell you that, I'd prefer that they their way of life there.
Well, it's like we said earlier, it's just not compatible with our Western ideology. And our Western ideology is that people are free will, boys and girls. It's not that we're, the bottom line, and this is how I feel about the Constitution. I really, really, truly feel, it's not the Bible, but I really, truly feel it was an inspirational, divinely inspirational document from God, the real one and only God. Because look, God gave us free will, that thing within us that not even God takes from us. He allows us to choose him, Jesus, or to not choose him. It's free will. He doesn't want us to be little puppets on a string where we're forced to worship him, that we must submit or die. That is not how God operates. So he allows us this free will, and that free will is within the document of the Constitution because that is the way God wants us to be. He has granted us free will. So who is it, any man on this planet, to take away free will from us? So, I mean, that's why I look at it and realize that if any population comes in here and wants to take away free will from any population, it's not a population that is compatible with the rest. And it's not saying we hate people more than another. It's just saying, hey, this is not compatible. Now, in the greater scheme of things, as far as just letting everyone in and just having sanctuary cities, I say to people, who are in leftist thinking, I said, you have to look at this problem at a practical level. Look at, we're in $20 trillion in debt. And you're like, yeah, just open the doors to everyone. Just come on, have them all come on into here. And then you're telling me, well, you can't get a job for more. You're suffering. Your husband has been cut from his job and you can't pay your bills. You used to be able to, but now things aren't, paying for the same thing that you used to. You have to realize the more people you let in here, the more that there's less resources. Not to say we don't want to give and give people the same kind of lifestyle that we've enjoyed by coming here the right way, by coming through Ellis Island or being bedded, but to now just let people come in droves without any bars, without any stoppage, is not practical for anyone. We all hurt. If we don't have anything to give, if you have a house of nothing, a refrigerator of nothing, you let everyone come in, we can't feed them. And so how are you helping yourself as well as the others? that you let in?
Well, I think it's generous to allow people to come here. They always throw up the argument of it's a melting pot, and you know what would happen if we'd never if we felt the same way 150, 200 years ago. Well, that's great, but times are different, and the country is becoming saturated, and it's generous to let people come in legally. And if they come in legally, that's great. But we don't owe the rest of the world a free ride. And if they have miserable conditions where they are, then why don't they become educated about those issues and try to do something in their own environment? And, you know, it's unfortunate, but in human history, there has always been suffering and there always will be. And so, but why is it our responsibility to take care of the rest of the world? We can't even take care of ourselves anymore.
Yeah, exactly. And we can be a beacon to others to fight for freedom, but first we have to do it for ourselves. And there's a wonderful girl, I think, in Afghanistan that wanted to be educated, and the Taliban, someone in the Taliban actually shot her in the head, and she had to have brain surgery or whatever, but she's an activist. She fights for freedom for women in her country. Because guess what? She cares about it that much. And that's the same with all over the world. If we all were to fight, I mean, there's way more of us than the evil people who just want to keep us down and enslave us. So I always say to people, if all of us rise up and stand up for our freedom, no matter where we are in the world, the people who want to be the kingdom or the kings or the empires won't be able to keep the people down.
Yeah, I think that these are strange times, and I think that it is, personally, Anita and I think it is prophecy unfolding, and it is astounding how precisely it's you know, foretold. And so what does that mean? Just throw up your hands and give up? I don't think so. You're always to resist evil, and there's no shortage of that. But I mean, the reason we did this film is because we wanted people to wake up and hopefully you know, use it as a Paul Revere to hand to those people they know that roll their eyes when you say any of these issues. But there's a definite agenda towards global government and the loss of American sovereignty and everything that we have known being gone. And if people are really naive enough to think that would be fun, well, then I guess they deserve what they get, because it's unfolding.
Well, I implore everyone that if they think it's great, because I had a guest on recently who said, I like the government being in my stuff. I like them doing stuff for me. Then I implore you to really, really, really watch this film. I implore you to really check out what that means for you on an everyday basis. Right now, you still have a great portion of your liberties, but really, really go out there and get Revelation, a Dawn of Global Government today, and really get an in-depth understanding of what that means, what you're saying you want. And let everyone know where they can find out more about you, support your upcoming film, and get the Revelation film, which I think they can get on Amazon. Can they get on your website as well?
Sure.
Yes, it's on our website, which is revelationthemovie.info.
Awesome.
It's Revelation, it's a singular word, revelationthemovie.info.
Absolutely. Well, I think you both, this is so imperative that people really begin to look at this. I hope that everyone listening in just have an open mind. I know a lot of people have heard this is hogwash, it's silly, there is no conspiracy, global government. But, you know, I implore you just to look into it yourself. Don't take what we're saying as absolute fact, because, you know, I want people to educate themselves. Don't take what the news gives you either, anyone. Look at it yourself. In fact, try to prove us wrong, like that guy did with his Christian friend. Go out there to prove us wrong. I implore you, go do that. Go read the Quran, go read the Hadith, go check out this movie and educate yourself. An educated population has now power to work with. Knowledge is power. So I thank you both for coming to share your gifts and wisdom and this wonderful film that you created, Revelation, Dawn of the Global Government.
Christina, thanks for having us, and
we appreciate it.
Wonderful ray of hope in New York.
Thank you.
Take care of yourself up there.
I will.